Instead of appraisee, appraiser is always in the emotional stress and all that.
I also sum up the key highlights of what I observed over a mail. The reason why I sent over a mail is, that also remains as a record. And all of us do know the only formal record that any organization would maintain about any employee's performance is the performance appraisal record.
Somewhere I think the performance appraisal is also a little hyped and people tend to get quite stressed about it.
Hello everyone, welcome to the HRK Vichar expert series on performance appraisal. What is this discussion all about? Simply put, this particular discussion has been planned to help you answer some of your queries around appraisal. A lot of us have a lot of misconception as to how performance appraisal is done within our organization. To answer some of our questions, we have our panelists here who are established HR professionals from the industry. We have amongst us Ms. Ambika Prashant, who is the Global HR Business Partner for a reputed software firm.
Hi Gauri, thank you so much for inviting me this morning.
We also have amongst us Mr. Joy George, who is the HR Head, CDK Global, India.
Hi Gauri, exciting to be here this morning.
We also have amongst us Mr. Jitendra Paintse, who is the Head HR of a Spanish multinational company. Hello, sir.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be amongst this panel. And now we start our panel discussion on performance appraisal. So, just for the panel, just to start our discussion, I see it as performance appraisal as an emotional roller coaster ride for both the employee and the manager, and that's typically how people observe it in an organization. I just wanted to hear your views on it. Ambika, if you could help us with some of your insights on this.
Sure, absolutely Gauri. So if you look at it, I'm sure Joy and Jitendra, you can just join in, right? Yes, it is some amount of roller coaster ride, I would say, because there are some expectations. People think that they have been performing a lot, throughout whatever 6 months period or a year based on the way appraisals are done in each company. Their expectations are quite high, and obviously as managers, we also have different expectations from them. At the end of it, matching those expectations and getting both of them on the same page, sure, right, is clearly a kind of a roller coaster ride. So that's how I would like to put it across.
I completely agree. Over and above that, if you look at what makes it emotional is, until that particular session, you were very informal with each other. But once you get into doing a formal performance review, you start reflecting on good and bad things that has happened from a performance perspective, and explaining it becomes a sort of sentimental stuff. Even for someone to hear, particularly positive feedbacks when you hear, I have often realized the appraisee begins to become a little soft and sentimental. Oh, my boss acknowledges at least on this occasion that I have done something great, etc. Even the appraiser actually goes through a sort of emotional stress to some extent. That's because articulating things right at that point of time is very important.
Correct.
And while they may have listened to you throughout the day, that particular 30 minutes or 40 minutes, they would listen to you with as much attention, intent, focus and dedication as possible. And that highlights why these sort of sessions can really be emotional.
Yeah. So actually, Joy, I think what is pretty interesting is if we kind of have frequent reviews, right? Yes. I mean, whether it is a monthly or maybe a quarterly, I don't think there'll be so much of emotional turmoil or the stress that one need to go through, right? If we end up having once in 6 months or once a year, that's when people are waiting anxiously to know where exactly they stand, what's their rating, what does my manager think about me, So I mean, if you ask me, I think the best thing is to kind of have this reviews done throughout the year.
What I feel is mainly it's very stressful for the appraisers basically, because they don't want to give any negative comments. Basically. So instead of appraisee, appraiser is always in the emotional stress and all that. So how I should give the negatives and all that. So I saw few appraisers, they try to avoid something. They try to avoid face-to-face discussion, or they want to keep very minimum discussions and all that, because they don't want to go into the detail, giving them the negative feedback and all that. They want to be a very good in front of them.
The emotional element obviously runs high on both the sides. What I generally do is once I have shared my predominant thoughts as to what has worked well and what has not worked well, I also sum up the key highlights of what I observed over a mail. The reason why I sent over a mail is that also remains as a record. And all of us do know the only formal record that any organization would maintain about any employee's performance is the performance appraisal record. And nothing like the appraiser's own comment written down fashion being maintained and being made available to the employees. So I have found it as a good thing, and employees have received it pretty well. And even for me, that helps me articulate my thoughts pretty well when I write it down over a mail.
And taking a cue from that, and a point which you mentioned, that appraisal is not a one-time activity. I just wanted to understand when does the appraisal start? When does a performance appraisal start in a life cycle of an employee in an organization?
So, Gauri, my thoughts are, I think it starts from the day one of people coming on board. Okay, trust me, there's no right time than the day one, right? Somewhere I think the performance appraisal is also a little hyped, and people tend to get quite stressed about it. My thoughts are that if you end up giving feedback to your team throughout the year, or whenever you have your regular one-on-ones, telling them where exactly they stand, what are the areas of improvement, and document as much as possible. I'm not saying that you need to document every conversation, but the key ones needs to be documented, right? If you do that at regular intervals, then I would say you don't have to wait for a quarter or a 6 months to have a formal meeting sitting in a room in that stressed moment, and so that's what my thoughts are.
And the outcome of the whole exercise becomes even more acceptable.
Absolutely.
Because they have been in the know of what's progressing, what's not progressing, and what's the thought happening in the leader's mind. That's a very useful practice. Only thing is people need to find the time.
That's the difference.
That's the only thing. While most of us in HR, because this is our profession, right? We probably would do it, but a lot of other leaders, I don't think they get into that practice of giving continuous feedback.
And I think in this case it becomes a more forward-looking process as well. The employee knows where he or she stands in that particular time duration and where they need to progress from there.
And for the manager as well, right? I mean, he or she would even know what the aspirations of the employee is.
My views is it should be a continuous feedback sessions. It should happen and all that. And just to make it, then we said let's do it quarterly or 6 monthly, because otherwise it will not happen. So just to ensure that it will happen, we said okay, do it either quarterly or 6 monthly.
6 monthly. Actually, while talking about Ambika bringing up that point of continuous feedback, the other day I happened to read an article which was pretty much a research outcome done by Mercer on performance reviews. It's a global study, 1,100 odd HR heads participated in that. They speak about 4 pillars, and one of the pillars they mentioned about it was what they call it as continuous feedback. Actually, they used some technical words like your leader should be empathetic, at the same time action oriented in the feedback.
Correct.
It's not enough to use certain general terms and words to explain something that happened over the last quarter or half year. It's important to articulate very precisely as to what has happened.
Absolutely.
And what action therefore has to be initiated. Individually or collectively. And that particular point I really like. So it's not a casual conversation of any type. It has to lead to a specific action.
See, that's why in performance we said you have to mark basically the risk, whether the goal set targets are at what risk. For example, whether you're on the track, you are behind, or actually it's at the risk. Suppose you mark at the risk and all that. So as an appraiser, or as a HR, we can concentrate on that risk factors, why the performance is not improving and all that. So I think in continuous improvement, it is very important to highlight the risks and risk factors basically.
And also another thing, sorry, Gauri, I just cut you, but interesting point that you brought up in the beginning about the emotions bit of it, right? I want to attach the relationship also to this,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So as I said, the continuous feedback would probably help in having a better relationship between the employee and the manager as well, right? Because there are no surprises at the end of it.
Absolutely.
One fine day, if the employee gets to know that he's at the bottom, bottom of the performance scale, then obviously, the reactions are different, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to interacting with the manager, the person gets into silos, not speak with the manager and then badmouth manager, and get into all kind of.
It's become only formality sometimes.
Absolutely,
Just to complete the PMS.
that's true.
True.